January 2011 version of the PRAC committee meeting. I am the chair. My name is Brian Watt, and we'll start down there with you, Mike.
Mike Mitchell.
Patrick Sling.
Lynn Betteridge.
Ken Seamaker.
Brian Burke. Stephen Owen.
Scott Archer, staff.
Denise Kai, staff.
Okay, and yeah, that's a good segue here. We've got two brand new members. Brian Burke already introduced himself, and Stephen Orr, so we welcome them to the committee. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to what could be a very interesting point of the meeting here, the annual election of officers. So I'd like to, I know that you guys have been thinking about this, so let's just open the floor to nominations for the chair of the Park and Rec Advisory Committee, which is this position that I'm sitting in right here. It's just the chair. I have to sit right here. So, any nominations to replace?
I would,
Current chair.
I'd make a nomination and kind of in line with what we've done in the past. I mean, it's been typically our longest tenured individual. I know I have an opportunity to chair, and so I would nominate Mike Mitchell for that position, only because Marty's not here. Otherwise, I would probably give that nod to Marty, but I'd like to nominate Mike.
Okay. Marty's still a member, right?
Yes, he is. He's just not right here again.
Okay.
Brian,
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah, I might just let you know.
Talk to Marty about that.
Yeah, Marty communicated with me this week that he's not here tonight. Obviously, he got in touch with me to let me know that he wasn't going to be here, and that he's had some issues come up on the personal side of things that may end up being a problem for his membership on the committee. He didn't say for sure, but he wanted to kind of let me know that he's trying to figure that out right now. So hopefully by our next meeting we'll know his status. But it may be that he might not be able to continue on the committee, possibly.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, any other nominations for chair?
Brian, are you not interested in serving again?
Oh, I mean, I would serve again, but I think, you know, it'd be great if one of you guys wanted to serve. But yeah, I mean, I'm not set against it. Good question. But
Well,
I'd rather to have somebody else do it. Yeah.
Oh,
I just say I thought that's a good question as well.
Yeah, it is.
I think you do a great job, Brian. I love your passion for the committee, and yeah, I think you do a good job.
I would like to nominate Brian and then offer to serve as vice chair. And maybe learn at your feet for the next year.
Learn from me. That would be my honor. Well, yeah, so are there any other nominations for chair? So we have Mike Mitchell and Brian Watt. Any other?
We're all too green, so to know who's the
All right, but I guess I will abstain from the vote. I think that would be proper. And we'll have a vote. Who would like Mike Mitchell to be the next chair of the Park and Rec Advisory Committee? By show of hands. Show of hands.
I will.
All right, and who would like the current chair of the Park and Rec Advisory Committee, myself, me, Brian Watt, to be in this position for another year? By show of hands. Okay. There you have it. I'll have to tell my wife if she's not listening.
Your cell phone will ring in a second.
This is phase one of you getting out of this thing. No. Thank you very much. Okay, so I am,
Thank you.
but, you know, I'm still under like a 6 month probation period, I think. Mayor Neely is, and, you know, the revised, reappointment letter said something about a 6 month probation. If I really screwed up in that 6 month period, he'd have to fire me. No, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I didn't say that. All right, so let's, close the floor then for the, nomination and election of the chair position, and open up the floor for the nominations for the vice chair of the Park and Rec Advisory Committee. Do I hear any nominations for that? I hear a self-nomination.
Let me nominate Mike. I think that's a wonderful way to do committees, is to learn and then know what you're getting into.
Any others? Okay, all those in favor of Mike Mitchell being the vice chair of the PRAC for 2011? It's unanimous. Okay. Close the floor. Closing the floor. Yeah, I don't. It's still here. And all right, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes. And I'll just ask if you all had a chance to take a look at the minutes and digest them. We had them electronically at home, but I had to review them here because I didn't have time. So I'll give you a minute. Does anybody need a minute to review?
I have had a chance
Okay.
to review them.
All right. Anybody want to propose that we approve the minutes?
I will propose that we approve the minutes.
Second. Okay. All those who approve the minutes from last meeting, which was the December 2nd meeting of 2010, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And disapprove? Okay. So we approve the minutes from the December 2nd meeting of 2010. All right, we move on to citizen comments. I do have one comment form here, and I know that Sean wants to speak too. Let's start with the name on the comment form, which is James Nacita. Mr. Nacita. Yeah, I think you're fine.
Thank you very much. My name is James Nacita. I live in Oregon City. Coming here to you folks tonight with 2 hats on. Firstly, my city commission hat, and I wanted to thank you all for your service, and also to thank the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for supporting the commission at the end of last year and buying that property out in Kanema. That was a really good deal. The opportunity presented itself. Got to give a lot of credit to Scott for negotiating a terrific deal on that in a timely manner, so we could wrap it up and close it before the end of the year like the property owner wanted to. And that's a great addition to Kanema and Oregon City. One of the visions that many citizens have talked about have been to kind of link the north side of Kanema, Kanema Park, with the south side of Kanema and all the vast metrolands through some kind of trail system around Kanema. And that property was the first kind of opportunity to seize to make that linkage happen. And we're hoping, obviously, that we can complete the linkage. So with that, I'm going to put on my citizen hat and just express some personal ideas on parks. One's from me and one's from a friend, and I'll mention them both. And the first one kind of springboards from the idea of what the linkage suggestion that presents itself in Kanema, and that is I'm wondering whether the PRAC might consider taking up as a formal study process park linkages. Linkages between parks and that area I just mentioned, like from Old Kanema Park to the Metrolands is one, but there's also, for example, between Old Kanema Park and Waterboard Park, between Waterboard Park and the Promenade, between Waterboard Park up to Rivercrest Park, from the promenade to Old Kenema Park. There's just all kinds of really neat opportunities for joggers, people walking their pets, etc., to just move through the city through all these parks that we have, and link them, some through trails, some through designated sidewalks and pathways, etc. And it's just a great. It's just, I think, something that would benefit the city tremendously. And another idea, it kind of continues along this linkage theme, is one from Carlos Torres. Carlos and Sarah own Wine Stock downtown. And Carlos couldn't be here tonight. I told him, there was a meeting tonight, and he's had an idea he's expressed to me. And I, suggested that he come in and express it to you, but Thursday's a very busy night down at the wine bar. And his suggestion that he wanted to pass along was to think about the creation of a major kind of roads to trails, possibly along the old abandoned railroad right-of-way that runs up Newell Creek Canyon, mainly for bicycle connections. From this, the old center of the city downtown up through the college and beyond for long-distance bicyclers. Some of the points that Carlos has made has been, for example, that there's a whole community of bicyclists in the Metro-Portland area. To be able to attract them with a quality, bike trail and long-distance bicycle network would be an economic boost for the city, to have them come down here and, with their bikes and their cars and visit places downtown, and then ride up on their way to the college and the neighborhoods and beyond. And I'm really attracted to that idea, and I just thought I'd come and share it with you folks. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely something to consider. And we've talked about, not in that much detail, but talked about linkages and the real, symmetry and synergy you can find, rather, with all the different parts that we can link together. So yeah, it's absolutely worth taking a look at. So thank you. Why don't we? Obviously, we're going to have as a part of the minutes, Scott. Maybe we should talk further on how to get that on the agenda and get that discussion going, or keep it going, I should say.
I think in part we're kind of looking at some connections and linkages, and I think we could expand on that conversation a little bit. But if you want to put it on next month's agenda, just let me know and I'll do that.
Well, it's something that interests me a lot, and we've talked a lot about connecting the area there by the Cove through the RV park into Clackamas Park and John Storm, and then into the middle of the city, and then up the stairs, and etc. So I mean, it's something that I feel passionate about, and I see different pathways and things in my mind. But if we talk about it more comprehensively, I think that would be a great idea.
I can put it as an item on next month.
Okay.
Conversation.
Yeah, I guess what we need to do is to kind of put some more meat on the bones of that discussion, and maybe do a little bit of research. I mean, we could talk about it, but probably not at length right now. I'm not suggesting we would do it right now, but I'm saying with the information we have right now, if it didn't increase by the next meeting, we wouldn't have a whole lot to talk about, I don't think, unless.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm not familiar with the right of way there. Does anybody know what exactly exists there? I mean, is there the through the Newell Creek area? I mean, is there a certain width of a right of way that's been unobstructed that travels that whole distance from top of the hill all the way down to the shops?
I'm not familiar with the entire rail. I don't know, James, if you know any more about that and you want to answer that. But I do know. Just sorry, I didn't mean to say.
It's fragmented.
Yeah, it's nothing is unobstructed in the canyon. I would say probably.
Yeah.
It'd be there's a lot of growth in there, and the other thing I wanted to add to that piece of the conversation is, it's Metro's property. Metro owns it. Although the city and Metro have a very good relationship, I mean, we're doing the same thing. You know, the parks and open spaces is the same mission, and it's in our city limits. So we have a lot of partnerships, a lot of, with access points, and with Newell Creek, and then also with the Kenema Bluffs property because of the amount of property that Metro owns there. So there has to be some kind of engagement of Metro in the conversation to do something on their property. But if it's something that the city supported and wanted to look at, I think they would certainly be receptive to the conversation. I can't speak for them because it's their property, it's their jurisdiction, but they're usually open to sit down and talking about things with us.
I see a couple different avenues to pursue. I mean, it's linkage that could be really affordable, with the signage and crosswalks and things that use existing walkways and throughways without having any major construction. So there could be linkage light, and then more serious kind of conversations about linkage too, right? So they'd be open to a pretty broad discussion.
And as it happens, kind of on that same note, we are in some conversations right now with Metro about some of the access points into the canyon, from city property, some for positive reasons, and then some for kind of more management issues that are happening with some neighbors and stuff that we're just kind of in. It's just management issues that we're in kind of regular conversations about, but it's a topic that's timely because we're having some of those types of conversations right now.
Would it be possible to bring a map for a visual, possibly with a highlight of this right of way? Is that something you would have access to?
Yeah, definitely have access to the map of the Metro property, and we'll have to see how well defined we can make that railway.
Yeah, for me, I'm trying to get an understanding of exactly where it is, and how long it is, and how you access it.
I'll see what I can do for the next meeting with that. Come up with the best that I can. For sure, like I said, for sure a map, and then I might just be able to give Metro a call with what they've got mapped on that property.
I have also a clarifying question for you, Scott, about when we talk about studying the possibility, does that automatically mean staff time, or is that a consultant usually, or how would you access studying?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it gets
that far?
If it gets pretty in depth to that level, typically it would result in some consultant time, some planner type consulting. But I guess we can kind of just see where it goes with the conversation.
Yeah,
again, the resources of Metro and their staff and whatever mapping they already have, I'll attempt to tap into that first, just to at least get an idea of what we're even looking at, and then we can kind of work from there. It does generate some staff time for sure. This is a request that'll take some time. I think just putting this map together won't be too big of a deal, and then we'll just see where it goes from there.
Wonderful.
Remember the tour we took when we went and saw Waterboard? Who was there? Was it Patrick was there?
Yeah.
Were you there, Lynn?
There's a tour.
Yeah, the tour. And I'd hate to lose. For instance, this is just a for instance. We could talk about this as well, but it would have to be determined if we were to connect in behind the armory, the old road that goes up behind the armory, how that's all just all falling and eroding away there. But there's still in my mind at least the possibility of having a trail, enough room for a trail, for a jogging trail or what have you. Obviously no vehicular traffic, but anyway. That's something. I mean, I've ran that, and I think I don't know, Ted, have you run that before?
I prefer not to run uphill.
Yeah. I'm a ridge runner, so I get up and run that ridge, and then down onto Fifth Street or Linden Fifth right there. But anyway, I love that area, so I think there's a lot to talk about. Really. All right. And now Sean Dockley.
Good evening. My name is Sean Dessler, and I want to come and talk to you tonight about safety around my house and around other neighbors of parks. We've got a lot of people in the city that you probably don't hear from, but they're the people whose fences back right up to parks. And when I moved in, it was an open field, and so we've watched this park behind my house develop. It happens to be Wesley Lynn Park. But I'm sure some of the things that I'm going to share with you are common amongst a lot of the other parks. Brian and I spoke several months ago, and what I would like to urge you to do is to take some sort of action. I've proposed several possibilities to help the neighbors of parks with the safety and security. A story that I'll tell is a couple months ago, I went out into my backyard at about 6:37 at night to dump the trash. It's pitch black as I look across the dark park, and within 5 feet on the other side of my fence is a group of 4 kids smoking stuff that they shouldn't be, but I had no idea they were there. It was startling, it was scary. In my neighborhood, we have several senior ladies that live alone and have to deal with this sort of thing behind their house. It doesn't happen often, but in the summertime at 11 p.m. when it's dark, any of us would call the police. They would show up, and they'd be able to shoo these people away. If I don't suspect any illegal activity, though, this time of year, they have every right to be there because the park is open. It's open till 10 p.m. And so I look at it from 2 roles. One role is your role as a public advisory panel. You have to take all the citizens' interests in mind, and so there's 2 sides to this. There's the people who live on the other blocks away from the park that might want to walk their dog at night, and they might want to walk through the park, and so you have to weigh the fact or the need for them to walk through the park with the people that are directly next to the park and our safety as well. So that's something that you get to wrestle with, and hopefully you come up with the right solution. But the way I look at it is during the day, we're the first people out there picking up the trash, picking up the dog mess, calling Scott when there's a problem or Larry when there's a broken pipe. And so I think a lot of us are silently asking for the park to be a neighbor back to us and at least give us some security and safety at nighttime. I think it's kind of the least the park could do back to the neighbors. If it was lit, it probably wouldn't be an issue, but just out in the pitch black behind the house is kind of disheartening, and it happens all the time. The park by us has become a place where kids will sit out there 4 or 5 cars at night, 32 degrees, pouring rain. I have no idea what they're doing there. I can't imagine, but I can't call anybody because it's 9:30. Doesn't close for another 30 minutes. 10 o'clock I call, and the police will show up. But if the park hours were changed, for example, that would give the police another avenue. They would be able to have a tool to say, hey, the park's closed, you don't belong here, you need to leave. If a park host was in place, the park host would be able to tell them that or call the police as well. So I'm not sure what the exact solution is for this particular case, but some neighbors have asked, well, why not a park host? Maybe that's the solution. I think the cheaper route is to change the hours with modifications in place. I know that there are certain parks that have lighted ball fields and skate parks. I think it would be unreasonable to close those early, but they're lit. It's a different atmosphere. But the neighborhood parks where people can go and hide in the dark is pretty disheartening. I know right now we have an input coming due on Monday for the bathroom at Wesley Lynn. And I know several people have said that needs to be lit. It makes a ton of sense. And when I looked at what they'd written, it actually makes sense to be lit on all 4 sides. Because what the police do is they drive in, look around. If they can't see what's on all the sides, who knows? They can just hide around the backside. And it just seems like a place for crime to happen. We've already had it happen. I think it was Hillendale. Hillendale, I think, had some undercover police work, led to some drug busts. But they are occurring, and it's the people like me that are having to call the police on it all the time. And really, it never gets back to the I've shared this concern with Scott numerous times, but there's not a lot that we can do without addressing it at your level. So I urge you to take some sort of action in the next few months. Talk about it. At this time of year, it really doesn't matter if you do it today or tomorrow because it probably won't take effect till March, April. We'll be into daylight savings time. I'm not going to reap the benefit of it until November next year. So take your time, do it right, and let me know if I can help and advise you on what to do. I suspect that this is action that you'd need to make a recommendation to the City Commission to make the final say. So. Any questions?
What I can tell you, Sean, and I apologize that I didn't get back to you, because we had discussed it a couple months ago. I think it was 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, which absolutely does not rule out readdressing it. I mean, we've got two new members, for instance, and it is a new year as well. So, and one of the things I think we didn't discuss is lighting, or the potential of the new structure and lighting, and how that could help or potentially not help. And you know, it may cause nuisance lighting or nuisance lights for the neighbors as well. But I don't think we really went down the lighting path as much as we did the hours, like you talked about, the hours as far as impacting, you know, the neighbors, the community, the folks that actually are using the park to walk the dog or to have a nice peaceful walk in the park at 9:45 or whatever, just before the park closes. And then we also did, I forget who we talked to at the police station. We did have contact with them as well, and we wrapped them into the discussion. But all that to say, Sean, I think it deserves, you know, attention and another look. And I'm not afraid for this new set of folks here on this committee to take a look at it again, and maybe we'll talk about lighting this time. And I'm not sure if Park Host came up. I know it came up in Kenema when we talked about Kenema and security, but I'm not sure it came up during our discussion about Leslie Land.
Actually, that's, I was going to mention that I haven't mentioned this to Prac yet, and Sean, this would be good for you to hear since you're pretty involved and active with the park there. The new piece of property that we bought last summer at the end of the other end of the park, the undeveloped towards Leland, you recall that property, and Sean, you know we purchased that property. The existing house, there's a ranch house that sits on that property. Until such time that we do development, that house is going to stay there. And what we've been working on is determining, we have two options with that. So long as we have the house there until such time that if it needs to go away because of the park development, we can use it either for a rental and just generate income back to the park, to the parks fund, or what we've been considering more is having it become kind of a caretaker's residence. So that becomes basically a park host at that residence. Now, there's some good and bad with that. It's not as if you look at our park hosts in other parks, they're right in the park typically. The pad for the for where the RVs are at are pretty much right on the park. This one's a little bit set off. However, the sight lines are pretty good to the park. What we would ask the person to do if we go, again, we haven't made this decision yet, but we're leaning this way, is we would ask the caretaker as part of their, in exchange for, you know, greatly reduced rent or whatever, how that arrangement would be, which you typically do with a caretaker kind of a residence. They would make rounds so many times a day. They would have a little gator drive around the park, and they could certainly do night rounds. That would be part of it. Mm-hmm. Actually, just being a presence and helping the neighbors kind of with that. It's difficult to put the typical park host spots into our newer parks now because the land use rules have changed. The ones that are in place, kind of grandfathered in, it's a little bit more difficult to put those into the parks now, where you actually put an RV pad in the park. Not saying that you can't do it, but it's a little more challenging now. So with our new parks, we haven't looked at doing those RV pads for park hosts as much, but again, this is an option, so let you know that's being thought about too. And that person would, would want to engage with the neighbors as the park hosts typically do and get to know who people are. And if there's a problem, they can go to the park host and say, at 9 o'clock every night, there's these kids out here, would you help us with them? And they kind of become another advocate and another, I don't want to call them security, but they help to police the park, and what they can do. So something we're looking at for that.
Very good.
And we're going to be putting that in place this spring. It's either going to be a renter or park host caretaker.
And my preference is really the adjustment of the park hours, or at least a wintertime adjustment. I think the biggest key is the tool. The changing of the hours becomes a tool for law enforcement. And if you don't do that, then park hosts can't say anything at 7 o'clock on a December night. Nobody can.
They can't have somebody smoking pot.
Well, I'm sorry, but I have the same ability at that point to call
Right.
as well. But
Did you say you didn't because, I mean, when you
that particular night I did,
Because-
and the police showed up as soon as they got in their car and drove away, because it seems like that stuff doesn't last. They come, do it, and leave.
I'm surprised they could do that so close to your home and not out.
Yeah, we smelled it in the house.
Why they'd be right next to the fence.
We have smelled it in the house other
It's a big
times
park.
when the windows are open. And and that's where it goes. Some nights when you're in the fall and it's not too cold out and you have the windows open, that's when it's really strange, is when you hear the rustling behind your house. Normally you're either in a neighborhood where there's a house behind you, so that's you have faith that it's just your neighbor behind you making the noise. But in our situation, you have no idea what's out there, and so you want to sleep with your windows locked. And we shouldn't have to do that. And so I've even wrestled with the idea of the jogger. Boy, whoever brought that up after that discussion, I think Scott shared it with me. I think that was a great concern, though, because it leaves perspective for me. I need to think about the other person that walks through that park. But chances are I'm also not going to be calling on them. So I go back to the police officer seeing a person walking their dog is probably going to check their ID and let them go, too. 4 cars that have been there for an hour and they've received 2 neighbor calls on them, they're going to treat a little differently.
On the vandalism issue, are you seeing vandalism to neighbors, to property owners?
To the park. To the park. There's not been a lot at Wesley Lane, but there's been some stock and carry, mostly playground equipment. But that specifically is a place where I see them go. Late summer, 11 o'clock at night, you'll see teenagers, 18, 17 years old, sitting all over the play structure, and there's nothing I can do.
It's supposed to hang out.
Yeah. And then something comes up missing the next day. And it's kind of sad. The equipment that you buy out there isn't what we buy in our backyard. It's really expensive. So.
Yep, that's where I saw the graffiti too. There's graffiti up in that tower every once in a while.
Yes.
I have to check it before my kids play on it. We do a good job of scrubbing it. I know that too.
I was going to say, some of it, and I know you're aware of this, is the results of, it's part of the relationship. You're living next to a park. So, the privacy thing, it's good and bad. You've got a park right there you get to live next to. I grew up next to Rivercrest Park too, and that was awesome. But, you're good. There's a privacy issue there, and noise. Yes, you're going to have a little bit more of that. I'm sure you're not. I'm sure you're not being oversensitive to these things. I mean, those are legitimate concerns when you have people vandalizing and
Yeah, we definitely just assume the parks and the ball games, and that's something that, frankly, I enjoy, and it's never been a nuisance. I really thought when the park was built that especially in the fall when soccer's going along and the soccer's right behind our house, that it would wake us up on the Saturday morning. Well, the games don't start till 9 usually, and it's never been an issue. So the noise has never been an issue. So when it becomes quiet, and then that quiet changes again. The late at night, things settle down, the parking lot empties out, you have the faith that, this place is done, it's closed. And then later, stuff kind of sneaks back in. You get kids out there with loud cars, and it's really annoying, frankly.
Anybody else? Okay, Sharon. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for your time.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Sean. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. And I didn't ask about this prior to the meeting, but I think we're going to look left here, and Scott's going to tell us about boards and commissions orientation manual.
So, just real briefly, this is brand new. Actually, the timing is really good because we have 2 new members, and it kind of gives a little bit of an overview on what your role is as a committee member and kind of the responsibilities and so forth. But this is a document that was produced by our city recorder. She, Nancy I, our city recorder's office is the office that's responsible for sort of all of the boards and committees information, and she's the one that kind of all the applicants apply for this committee. It comes through their office and to me, and then as we move it forward on the appointment order. So the city recorder is kind of the keeper of the information, also is the keeper of the public records, and is responsible for letting the boards and committees and the city commission know what their rules and responsibilities are. So this is actually kind of a first-time thing for the city. We generated this through some discussion over the last year about putting this type of comprehensive manual together. And so this is for you to keep as a member. Hopefully you'll take the time to look through. Some of it is applicable, some not. Some will be about different boards, specific to those boards. Some of it is just general to all boards. I want to just kind of walk through just a few things and kind of highlight them and sort of call them to your attention on page 6. Again, everything in here you can take the opportunity to look through, but these are just a few of the highlights. And page 6 sort of talks about the whole city form of government and how we operate as a city. We have a city council manager form of government, which means that the city council is the elected body. They sort of set the policy direction for the city, and the city manager works for them, and his or her job is to carry out the wishes of the city commission. He or she is the executive, and that's who I work for as the city manager. So that kind of talks about the form of government. Just make sure you understand, what the structure is that you're serving within. Page 10, and I'm kind of just jumping through a little bit here, but page 10 talks about just kind of the general overview and citizen participation and sort of why we have boards and commissions. And page 11 kind of continues that. It talks about some of this stuff is important for you to read because it talks about some of the legalities of what the board's makeup means in terms of whether you actually set rules or whether you're advisory. Again, we have a plethora of different types of boards and committees. They have different jobs and different authorities. And for example, the Parks and Rec Committee is strictly considered just an advisory committee, not to take anything away from it, because what you do is extremely important, and you do guide a lot of the decision making and have a lot of important input. But you don't actually have, quote unquote, any authority to change anything in the city code or the charter or the whatever. But you do have the ability to influence that a lot. And also the advisory part is not just to the commission, but your advisory to staff. And that's important for me, for Denise and I in our department, is we do get a lot of feedback, and we hear a lot of good feedback from you. Your job is to represent the whole broad community of spectrum of interest in Parks and Rec, and that's extremely important. And you do make those recommendations that work their way to the commission, and more times than not, they accept those recommendations, and usually often will take some type of action. Page 16 is the specific description of the Parks and Recreation Committee. It talks about the makeup and probably some of that stuff that's in your bylaws as well. By the way, I gave the bylaw copies to Steve and Brian, our 2 new members. If anybody needs, for refresher purposes or whatever, a copy of the bylaws, I've got some extra copies, or I can email this to you. Page 22 talks about the fact that your committees are public meetings. a good example tonight. They're open to the public. We have to do everything we can because we're the city, we're a public agency, to make these meetings available to the public. The information that takes place here, that's why we're talking in the microphone and we have these cameras here. These are broadcast on our city website. They're saved in perpetuity for people to go back and review these meetings if they want to. So what you do here is public. A public meeting is open to members of the public. We have to announce these meetings. We post them in different places. When we send you those agendas, they also are posted in facilities. They're posted on our website. They're sent to the newspapers as public meeting notices. So these are public meetings, and the city residents and then other people who live outside the city, citizens, our job is to make sure that they are aware of these meetings, and just that's important for you to know that as well. That we're not, often we'll be sitting here like we are at the moment, but nobody's sitting in front of us, but it's always a public meeting. The last one I've got highlighted here is, and again, there's other important stuff in here too, but page 23, coordination with staff, the city commission, and others. That just kind of talks about your relationship with the city commission, that your advisory, and how you can work issues to them, and also your advisory to staff. And our job is to support you in carrying out your meetings and having information. Your job is to let me know if you have concerns about specific issues and things that are important, and that's kind of what we do with these meetings anyway. Communication back and forth to the commission. Sometimes the city commission will specifically ask a board or a committee for an opinion or for a recommendation. Something comes to them, they'll say, I think this is important for the Parks and Rec Committee to take a look at it before we make a decision. And this has happened a number of times. So then I'll take that message to you at your next meeting and say, Commission would like to know what your opinion is on this, and that'll get kind of communicated back. Or the other way is you can generate your own initiatives to the commission. You don't have to wait for them to ask you their opinion. A lot of what you do here kind of works its way either directly or indirectly to the commission anyway, through a number of ways. For example, projects, and how I take those forward, or budgetary issues, because priorities that the PRAC has recommended and is pursuing or whatever, and staff is supportive of taking that, and some of those types of things will get incorporated through the budget processes. And some of those things kind of just work their way up the chain naturally. But sometimes the committee will need to take, if you have a recommendation that's been generated here, and you want the commission to consider some type of action, or just to have information as a message, you'll need to take that to them directly. And the way to do that is either to send them a memo that I can either help you write, or definitely my job is to make sure that communication gets to the commission. Or I think is more effective personally is you go to one of their meetings, and there's always an open period at the beginning of the commission meetings, just like there is on your agenda, where any member of the public can communicate. There's one more thing, and I was going to talk to you about this because we actually talked about this at your last meeting, which has been 2 months ago at this point, so it seems like it's been a while ago. And that is, some of the boards and committees do an annual report to the commission, and it's just you'll designate a representative. Sometimes it's the sheriff, maybe somebody else wants to go, whatever, and we'll just go to a commission meeting. I will work with the city recorder to schedule a report from the PRAC, and we'll actually block out, like, say, 10 minutes on the commission's agenda. They usually these usually take place at the beginning of their meetings, and just give a general report on, here's what your Parks and Rec Committee has been up to for the last year or so, and here's some of the things we're working on. And actually, this committee did that previously. Since I've been here in my time here, I'm in my 7th year with the city. There have been times where the committee has wanted to do that, and there have been times where it hasn't been a priority. So it kind of depends on your wishes. It's your committee. You can do as you choose as a committee. I think it's nice to get in front of the commission and be seen and be heard, just so they know what, reminded what you're up to, and remember that they have a parks committee that's interested and active, and so if you wish to do that, all you need to do is decide that amongst yourselves here, and then whoever's going to be the person that will go to that just coordinates with me, and I schedule it at the earliest opportunity with the city commission. Usually it's within a couple of meetings that we can get you on the agenda. So that, and I know that came up at your last meeting. We were talking about doing a report to the commission, just a general report or update. So anyway, that's kind of that. I encourage you to keep that, hang on to it. I think it'll be a useful tool for you to understand how things work, why we have a park committee, what your role is, how the city's governmental structure operates, and that kind of thing. If you have any questions, you can let me know. If you have any questions right now, I can try to answer them, and if you have something, you can always call me or email me if you don't understand something in there or whatever. And by the way, this we're in the process of giving staff, we're distributing these to all of our different boards and committees, so we're just starting to do that. So we're rolling these out.
Well, thank you very much. It's great. It's a good update. Review, I should say.
Sorry, Brian, I was going to say I like the org chart online. That's for me, is to get a visual of that and see how everything ties in and who reports to who and all the different committees all presented on one page there. That's nice.
And credit to our city recorder, Nancy Iyer. She's a phenomenal resource for the city. She has gotten us light years ahead in terms of records management and public information, and in the last about 4 or 5 years, she's done a wonderful job.
This must have been a beast to coordinate.
It
this
was.
together.
When you have what do we have, 13 or something committees, and all the we're governed by Oregon state rules and statutes that say what constitutes how you have to deal with public meetings, and putting all that together in one concise thing is a tough job. She did a really nice job. So.
Thanks again, Scott. Okay, let's see. Looking at under general business, the letter alpha there is dog park, and I believe we do have an update.
How long do you want me to talk? Not long, right? I'll keep it brief. I had a chance to meet with Scott and Larry just before Christmas.
Awesome. Sort
of with a couple of ideas in mind. One was, at least for beginning to think about a dog park, what is it we're really talking about? And then, given that, do we think there's any possible sites so that we're not spending any more time and effort if it turns out we don't think we have a place for it?
Mm-hmm.
So first we talked about kind of what we envision, and this is, don't get me wrong, we're not trying to direct it necessarily a certain way, but we were kind of looking at what might be maybe the ideal or the most common to see if then the land part of it worked. Basically, in the area, there are two different kinds of dog parks that kind of fall into two different big categories: a shared park and a dedicated park. Shared park could be nothing more than changing the sign in the park and putting up waste bags, and it's just shared use. The other being a dedicated dog park, not meaning necessarily a whole park turned over to dogs, but a dedicated, preferably fenced area within a park, possibly. Or it could be a whole park if it's a smaller park. As we talked through it, Patrick had some nice research on other cities with dog parks in Southwest Washington and the metro area, and almost without exception, shared parks were lower rated satisfaction-wise from dog park users, and certainly from Larry's perspective and Scott's perspective from a management issue or the possibility of conflict issues, shared park not as desirable. And I think it's pretty easy to assume that non-dog park users aren't going to necessarily appreciate that all of a sudden the park is shared and they didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So we kind of set that one aside and concentrated more on the dedicated dog park idea as really what we think would be worth pursuing. And again, not to limit it necessarily, but at least for the discussion of whether or not we have available land, that was sort of what we were looking at. The other thing that comes along with that from Scott's expertise, his informed opinion, is that there's also going to be a parking component, a land use process, which is probably going to result in a parking component to some degree. We don't know what, but probably something. So then when we started looking at property possibilities, we were looking for enough room for a dedicated dog park and parking. So then we kind of rolled out the big map, which I can do if you want to do that, and tell you about some of the spots we talked about, or I can just tell you about some of the.
Go ahead and do that, and then maybe you can.
I'll talk about it, and if we want to roll the map out, we will. And again, this is not meant to be a limiting list, just the idea that are there possible places. We talked about Glen Oak. The good news and bad news on that is kind of the same thing. The good news is it's a clean slate, so you could do whatever you want and integrate a dog park in as part of the bigger park plan. The bad news is it's a clean slate, so it's going to be really expensive to do and take a lot longer, because I'm not sure where. I don't know that Glen Oak is on our 2011 goals to start the planning process for Glen Oak. Anyway, obviously that's a ways out.
Spring.
Why is it bad news for the clean slate? I'm not following that part.
It's longer and more expensive to do. Because you're not
completely undeveloped.
Because it's completely undeveloped. Right. Right. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about Wesley Lynn Park, the phase 2 part of it, kind of the north end up by Leland and the house that we bought. That has there's quite a bit of land there. There's a little bit of infrastructure there, depending on what could be done with the house. And you got utilities there. Could conceivably be a second set of restrooms for the park at that end, and would also serve the dog park in that area. There is a small wetlands in that area. I'm not sure how much. Larry wasn't exactly sure how much, but there is some wetland situation in there. And even though phase 2 wasn't done, Larry said also, I don't know whether it was a handshake agreement or whatever, that there were going to be some ball fields as part of phase 2, even though we haven't done the phase 2 plan.
It's really not a master plan yet, so I would still call it an open slate on that undeveloped portion.
Okay, so that's another possibility. Third possibility we've talked about before here, and that's that power lines area. What's that road? Claremont, yeah. Which actually is 3 separate parcels. The middle one of the 3, the city owns. Private interests own the other 2. There, years ago, they were amenable to some sort of park development because it was kind of marginal use for development with the power lines there. Then there was a period of time when they thought maybe the power lines were going to be taken out of there. Now it turns out they're not. So there's a possibility that something might be able to be worked out there. It's nice and centrally located. It's a big piece of ground, nice access, centrally located, that kind of thing.
Parking.
That's
Parking
big
in
enough.
Claremont.
Yeah, if you had all three pieces of ground, yes. Yeah.
Good point, Brian.
We talked about at Hillendale Park, sort of to the north of the tennis courts, kind of between the tennis courts and where the old county animal control facility was. I looked at that quite a while back, but didn't realize the issue there. A lot of that, almost all of it, is county property and not city property. It's unused now. Unsure what their plans might be and whether the county would be agreeable to some sort of agreement. That's unknown. Lots of parking, no real neighbor issue. There's warehouse on one side and the jail on the other. Not too much, I mean, as far as neighbors close by. So that's another possibility. There is an area, would it be the east side of Park Place? Park? Okay. Park Place is very, it's kind of an underutilized park. Obviously, parking's already in place. It's a big park. An issue there, Larry mentioned that they even have difficulty mowing it up until April or so because of drainage. So there would have to be some drainage things done probably. And then we talked about an area that's not parkland, but is city-owned on the north side of the Oregon City Shopping Center, sort of down behind Firestone, right next to the McLaughlin Bridge over the Clackamas River. There's a piece of ground there. It would become kind of a natural extension of Clackamas Park. Parking is available. It would be a short walk to parking just by going under the bridge, and you're at that kind of overflow lot that's right next to McDonald's. And it also kind of ties into this linkage idea, because now you'd be, Clackamas River Trail, there'd be a dog park on your way through Clackamas Park, on around, whatever. To me, the big disadvantage of that one is it's not very centrally located. It's right up against the city limits, and very few people live there, so it's not necessarily all that convenient. So that's just kind of a brief overview, but I think the good news that came out of it is, yeah, there are potential sites. None of them are perfect. All of them might have advantages and disadvantages, but I think at least the three of us left that meeting feeling, do we have possibilities that might be worth pursuing? It seemed like, yes, we do. Scott, happy to have you add anything.
You covered that well.
What I'd like to suggest, if the group thinks it's worth pursuing, I think it is. I think it is time to look outside and try to make it known in the community that this is something that's under consideration. Maybe get something in the Trail News that's coming up. Maybe get something on the city website. Post information at Wilco and the pet store at the shopping center. They try to set up an email account where people can at least email in and say, yes, I'm interested, or how can I help, or here's a suggestion for property, or my business can do this, or whatever. I guess the question is that is it still premature to do that? Should we do that? Are we painting the city council into a corner? All of a sudden, people are going to be clamoring for something that we can't perform on for a while, or so. That's my report.
I think the manual says we could do stuff like that. I mean, just bring stuff up and, to the commission before it's ready. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's not ready, but just trying to make a joke.
What did we talk about as a process? I mean, that was the first step, wasn't it? Get you and Larry involved and kind of talk about what's the scope of what we're trying to accomplish and feasibility. It sounds like that went pretty well. I mean,
I felt good about it.
Mm-hmm. I've got the perception from Larry that he's not too excited about the maintenance aspects with that and the challenges with that, but with that said, I mean, if it's something that the community is really interested in, I think we've got a responsibility to look into it seriously.
I agree with that statement. I mean, those are, like I said, I think Mike did a really good job of painting that whole thing and outlining the conversation, how it went, and also bringing into the conversation some of the considerations, like being sensitive to the community or to the city commission. As far as anytime we add a new facility that we develop, it's going to be a maintenance issue that we have to consider, and we have to consider that in balance with where we're at right now. And I've talked about this a lot, and we'll continue to do so. We're expectation high and staffing low in comparison, as you know, with the amount of staff that we have for our community expectations. So while I do support, and I think that the idea of a dog park is good, I think it's something, it sounds to me like I'm getting the sense that there's more and more of a community desire to see this, and they're becoming more of an expected amenity versus a novelty. I mean, that's where we're kind of headed, or almost, we're probably there almost. So balancing the community's desire with how do we take care of it, yeah, that's something we'll have to kind of work through and figure out. We're talking about maintenance issues in general, and you know, this is certainly part of that whole discussion. It is one of the considerations. I'll respond to one of the things as far as the commission issue. I think we just talked about it a little bit ago. This is one of those potential things that you're initiating at this level and bringing forward. Probably be good at some point to, I think, before you put out a big public information campaign to get people interested, you want to run this by the commission, just to tell them you're doing it and get their feedback, and probably start to enlist their support or understanding of what you're doing. So that might be a specific item that you go talk to them about, just kind of let them know, or it might be included in something, you do an annual report kind of an idea, or over the next couple of months or something. Probably not good to put a bunch of information out in the community though without them at least having some heads up on that.
Yeah.
You don't probably want to get caught off guard too much. Although just to let you know that your minutes from these meetings are always, they're forwarded to the city commission, so if they read them, it's been something that you've talked about.
Right. Good point. I would suggest that, Mike, would you be interested, you or Patrick, in speaking at the next opportunity to speak in front of the commission, and let them know where we're at to this point, and get their feedback on the best next step in the process?
I'll gladly attend with you, as long as you're not shy.
Here's my suggestion before we do that, and it is to set up a list of criteria
Yes.
that we have used to rack and stack those choices. Criteria meaning cost being one of them, and then cost to maintain. So I think we have enough brains at the table and experience, and I'm thinking about Larry and Denise and Scott, to let us know the maintenance part, the maintaining, the sustaining of the dog park. But also, I think in today's economic environment, it's going to be hard to get any money for anything, even if it's a good idea. So I think we need to really prioritize based on how much dough is this going to cost the community. Although I also understand that, with community involvement, and group involvement, comes some sponsorship and potential for monies to come from elsewhere. But I think money would factor in greatly into a list of how we rack and stack these different options. Parking, I think, would also be another issue that would rank pretty high on a what would constrain us to building or having a dog park in that location. Land use ideas or land use issues that would be problematic. And then centrally located. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Central location, money. How do you put it together? How do you sustain it? That's a money question again. And then be it a people issue or a money issue, it's the same thing pretty much. And then parking, and then land use issues. Which one bubbles up to the top? If they're all okay, if they're all Larry Potter approved. Brilliant. And I don't know why I have a power line part stuck in my head, and that's where, where it's gonna be, but, I mean, look at these options. I thought really there was only one or two, but I think we do, before we go any further, before we present this as an idea, we need to show a little bit more diligence in working through certain criteria.
I,
And that might not take long.
I think I might add neighbors to your list, to proximity to neighbors.
Yeah.
in fact, I don't even know, I think if we go speak and present, that it would be more in lines of, it's all going to ride on support. I can't imagine that there would be a big push within us, the city commission, to make something like this without a major partnership with the community. Most, in my research of some of the dog parks that locally that's set up, have been, half to 100% groups that come together and make it happen, financing and staffing and support. Especially when these groups do it, then communities, of course, are more acceptable for them. So I think if we put our energies anywhere, it would be in how do we promote, like you were pointing out, Brian, how do we promote this and get it out there? And what should be our role in the promotion of that? Could it be that we could use our government website, so we could do a survey or put out information on the web so people can start a community group that can come and present. But it almost seems like we really have to recruit people who are interested and want to take on some of the hardships here, because it's a lot of groundwork, and when they then present, they'll want to know more details of the criteria for places and neighborhoods. But that was great groundwork, laying that out, to have it in the bank for future conversations as to where it's going to go. I think we all have to put our heads together to try to find partnerships. Who is it that's going to come out and want to help us? And I know they're out there, because I just neighbors all the time. When are we going to get that dog park? When are we going to get that dog park? Well, anybody else thoughts on?
I think what you said made a lot of sense to me about making sure we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves without making the commission aware of what's going on. I think you go there with a specific intention to request from them, hey, what would you like us to do? This is an interest from the community that's been, really, and they would probably, I would expect they have also heard this interest. I mean, so we believe there's a strong interest in the community. We've done some very preliminary investigation into it, and all of the items you mentioned, about sustainability and cost and parking and maintenance are things we're considering. But specifically a question for them, what would be the best way to go about this? And then I think after that, Patrick, with their guidance and making sure we're working with them, then I think those committees would be, would happen, and you'd solicit a lot more community involvement. That would be kind of my vision of the process.
And just maybe to elaborate on what I'm saying is there's probably some of these options that are unrealistic. That's what I'm saying. So why discuss them if they aren't as realistic or not realistic at all? I mean, it's a viable property, but is it realistic to even have it on the list to discuss it after you ran it through your list of criteria? And how long did that take? I don't know. I mean, and do you go to the commission before you do that, or afterward? Do we need to show that we've done at least that much work and thought and preparation before we go to them? My inclination, my feeling is yes, but I mean, I wouldn't be overriding on that, I don't think. I think if you go to maybe seek information and let them know that we're in the preliminary stages, and you so state, I mean, that's one thing, but still, I feel that we should maybe take it to the next level. How hard that's gonna be, I don't know. You know, to talk about those, you know, listing it, prioritizing it based on those, criteria. Any thoughts on how hard that might be there, Scott? I mean, for instance, you can, I think, you know, between you three, we could eliminate Glen Oak. I mean, if you look at it and you say, well, it's gonna take tens of thousands of dollars to even get started, I mean, is that a non-starter? Or is that something that we want to put near the bottom of the list? That's just a for instance. Is it just too costly?
Yeah, I mean, I think just doing that type of evaluation is something that we could go through as staff, although what I would like to try to do and suggest is try to keep the PrAC group engaged through those discussions. So I know, you know, Mike and Patrick are, I think, the designated dog committee at this point, subcommittee. It's the task force. You know, but, you know, whether we can, I know, you know, this is my job to do these kind of things, and you guys are volunteers, so it takes extra time out of your schedules, but, I mean, I would almost suggest having sit down, kind of like we did where we looked at the map and then taking it to the next level to keep you involved, so you've got the staff perspective, but you've also got the committee perspective representation there, because this is being generated here, so I don't want to leave that piece of it out, and we can make our suggestions and our thoughts.
If we did some level of detailed work before we met the commission, I would be more comfortable with that.
Maybe
Another meeting, and then just rack and stack them, and it doesn't have to be like, wow, this is tight, super tight, and we've done all the homework we could have ever done, but, you know, something that would take it to the next level, where, you know,
So
we could even say, you know, we've narrowed it down to 3 different places. I mean, there's 3 viable places. We started with a list of 6. We feel that there's 3 really that bubble to the top.
So
And
could we act and start some meetings with them next year? Like I was brainstorming. Why couldn't I set up a Facebook account for dog park lovers of Oregon City? And could we do that? Could we go that route and start to recruit people to get involved and organize and stuff like that? Or should we just wait till we discuss more?
I would think you'd want, before we started publicizing that the city commission, to get a little buy off on them. At least the concept of a dog park. I'm sure that the concept's not a hard issue, but I think before we went too far, we just get their buy off on the concept of it, and then, like you're saying, we come to them with our list of whatever that would be.
Right.
My only reservation, Brian, about more research before the commission is the commission may have a lot of input.
To help steer us.
They might have some guidance, so that's my thought.
And I think we're going to want to get a lot of community involvement on the siting part of it also. So, I mean, if we work, we got half a dozen criteria here, half a dozen sites, and it may be that Glen Oak, just for financial reasons, has to fall off the list or whatever. But I guess I have a concern to not narrow it down too much, because it's going to have to be a community dog park with community support, financial and physical labor, and all of that. And I think if you're going to help get that, if you have a lot more buy-in into how the thing, you know, where it ends up being coming from the community. But I think you're right. We do need to look at those sites with those criteria, and there may be one that pops right to the top, and there may be one or two or whatever that fall off the bottom. But I don't think we want to narrow it down too much before we get the community involvement. going on. But certainly another meeting. I mean, I'm looking at those list of sites and the criteria and thinking that without trying to put numbers on it necessarily, I think it's pretty easy to say, okay, this one's probably going to be the most expensive to do, you know, kind of rank them 1 through 6 on that. And central location, that's pretty easy to figure out. So I don't think it's going to be all that complicated to use those criteria. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, you don't have to go into some of the detail. And I get what both you and Ted have said, so that's great. I think it's fantastic.
I really like what this Brian over here closest to me just said, about, you know, again, just at least getting this in front of the commission as a concept. I think, I hear what you're saying, Brian, about wanting to be prepared, but at the same time, I think you don't have to get overly, I don't think you have to get very specific at all. In fact, I think you can just be very general and just let the commission know we're just exploring this. This is in the very preliminary stages. Part of that process is going to be you know, looking at sites, looking at the different issues, all the things you just talked about, and just kind of put it in that general capsule and say, you know, one of the next big steps is probably going out and publicizing this to the community that you're looking maybe to form a dog park committee or whatever you want to call it. It could be, you know, really kind of loose. It doesn't have to be a big official committee or anything, but just, hey, folks that are interested, you know, you post a meeting or something or whatever. The Facebook idea, we definitely can put information out on our website. That's a tool that we have that's a good resource, and we can do survey things when you get to that point of that, but more just for broadcasting. We're looking to get people that are interested in a dog park and starting to kind of engage in the process. But the commission piece, I think, is really important, and that point was really well taken for me. That maybe just a quick, hey, at one of the next couple of commission meetings or whatever. And again, you can show up. Well, next week's wouldn't be a very good one to do this at. I'll tell you more about that if you want to know. But there's gonna be a lot of people at that meeting, and I think their focus is going to be on some other things.
Citizen parliament.
Yeah. The commission has moved their next week's meeting to the Pioneer Center because they're expecting 150 to 200 people.
Wow.
Because of the discussion about the mall development.
Oh, nice.
So I wouldn't, my recommendation would be probably to show up and talk at that meeting, but maybe at the next one or something. And, you know, literally just a couple, you just come in at the beginning, you just sign up to do the public comments, say, hey, I'm representing Parks Committee, and we just want to let you know here's what we're doing about this dog park thing.
And I guess
without getting yourself into any boxes or anything like that.
And that would be on the public comment?
Right at the beginning.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be on stage. Yeah, you could do 3 minutes each. You could do
6 minutes.
Well, if you're representing, there's some rule that if you're representing an organization, I think you get 5 minutes.
Oh,
okay, wow.
Great. If you're doing it as one of their own team members are pretty.
Another thing too, going early would be putting it out there. It's going to make it more public too. So that's a little more advertisement to the community as well. So.
If the commission doesn't have any problem with that, and I think you could have that discussion about, all right, now let's go to that next level of starting to.
So I was going to tell the guys to keep moving forward while we're waiting to talk to the commission. Would you prefer that you have a little bit more free time in the next couple of weeks rather than, you know, because I know you're real busy. Would you prefer that, you know, we don't meet with you again and talk and start the level, or, you know, work on our criteria? Because at some point we're going to have to. We're not going to certainly eliminate any of these as we're talking, but. To keep moving forward until we do speak to the commission. Is that
so? Yeah, I'm in agreement with that because I think you're talking about generating some staff time here, and you know, having the commission kind of, they're not going to approve anything. You're not asking them to. You just want to get some head nods and say, you guys don't have a problem with us doing this, or do you? And if they do, then we'll definitely have to rethink what we're doing here. But it would make me feel a lot better generating staff time between you know, Denise and Larry and I and our map people that, you know, GIS folks that are going to end up probably refining, doing some mapping and different things and all the different things that go into it. I would feel a little bit better if at least they knew what we were doing.
Yeah, okay, before you did.
I think we're starting to
more
get,
time.
this is kind of starting to hit that launching point of
Okay.
getting pretty serious about the discussion. And this is great because this is about as serious as this discussion has been in the time that I've been in the city. So, you know, this is positive. It takes time, process, but you've got to just kind of keep moving ahead.
Not to keep, you know, going through this, but you think the commission would actually throw some questions at us?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Do they do that in the public comment?
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's-
Not. The norm would be probably not, but
If
since you're,
it's stimulating, they will.
yeah, well, and since you're one of their committees, they might want to, you know, have some clarifying questions, or I can't guess for sure, but it's possible. But again, I think you could be real general, and so you don't put yourself into a box or anything of limiting something, then you end up going a different direction, and then the commission says, well, I thought you were going to do this, and you told us you weren't, or whatever, you know, so.
You could certainly talk about the next steps that we talked about, you know, meeting with staff again and using certain levels of criteria to narrow down the field, et cetera, so. And, you know, going public, so to speak.
Assuming that the commission wouldn't have an issue with that also makes me a little bit more comfortable using city resources like our website and maybe putting something in the trail news or whatever the case might be.
So when is the next council meeting, not counting next week?
They meet the first and third Wednesday of the month, so I think it's the 16th. I'll check that.
That's the same.
Yeah. Be Wednesday, February 16th, 7 o'clock, right here in this room. And you could go to next week's meeting, but I just don't think it'd be as effective.
So, you'd like to see
Well,
the,
It sounds like they're gonna have their armor on.
Well, and you would probably go first too, so you'd be speaking in front of a couple other people.
You would.
What's wrong? You're here to talk about dog park? Yeah, you'd have a large audience.
That doesn't bother me, but
No, I mean,
they got their mind on something else. Oh,
Or maybe potential dog lovers are in that audience. You have my time, my friend Patrick.
large cross here.
Bring your dogs with you. Yeah. Excellent. All right, that was a great discussion. Goals up there, if you go ahead and open up that document and you'll see our new list of goals, 2011 goals there, the first document. There's 7, so, you know, obviously we need 3 more. I mean, it's just not complete unless we fill it out with 10.
Is that a government thing?
Navy thing? You gotta have 10, no. I don't know anything about the Navy. Except, I did see, what's the guy that, what was that? Don Knotts, the guy that turned into a fish. Yeah, I saw that the other day, that's about the only thing I know about the Navy.
Sorry, my bad. I'll agree to the service.
Yeah, sorry.
Opa.
It's a big thing during World War II there. Anyway. And as you can see there, if you look at the red line one too, you can see which goals we've actually taken off of the list. That might be a better one to look at right now. The playground installation, of Kenema Park, that's been sucked up in there to number 3. So we actually, that was really never an additional goal, so to speak. Carnegie Center we took off the list because of the current situation that we find ourselves in there. And really, we reached the end of the road as far as the task force and the concern that this committee had with the use of the Carnegie Center. And then finally, Ermatinger House is taken off the list because the National Park Service is not able to do what we need them to do. So we do have 7 and I jest when I say we need 10. I do have a couple of ideas, and most of you have that document that I sent out. And we've talked about just some ideas that, again, this list was generated from the master plan, and I would encourage Brian and Steve to just take a look at that master plan, and maybe if we discuss this next time, just at least the executive summary. I think most of us have read the executive summary of that, which is fairly good. It's a lot of information just in the executive summary. But a couple of things that you know, I think deserve attention on our goals list, or maybe not. I mean, I think, you know, should we put something like, does it even belong on there? I mean, like pool maintenance, and you know, what oversight or what recommendations should we make concerning hiring additional personnel, hiring additional staff to get us up to the level that we should be, as far as is it park acreage versus, is it based on acreage? Yeah, park acreage versus staff, which we're below. I'm not sure exactly how many we are below staff, below average or below what we should be for the state of Oregon.
Well, it's a national
standard.
There's always a little bit of, you know, you gotta take the national standard thing with a grain of salt because it doesn't fit every single situation or community. But if you read the national standards, and it's talking about quite a bit in your Parks and Rec master plan that we did there a couple of years ago, we're still about 6 or 7 full-time staff below the national standard for the amount of park acreage that we have. We did gain 1 new full-time position the last budget year, but we definitely are, you know, whether you agree with that and maybe you say, well, that's even a little bit on the higher side than we might realistically need. We are definitely understaffed, and, you know, I talked about it again earlier that talking about adding a dog park, that adds a component of maintenance. Right. As we talk about developing, you know, the rest of these parks, Kenema Park, as we updated this year, it's going to have some different levels of maintenance because that's going to be a higher standard of park. The undeveloped properties, as we develop those, even bringing undeveloped properties into our system, even though they're not developed, those add maintenance every time we do that. We've done a number of those the last few years because still have to chop down the weeds and the blackberries when they get overgrown. You're expected to do that. So anyway, I do think we've talked about the potential for this parks maintenance utility fee. That's a conversation that we're having with our city commission as well, and continue that kind of discussion. That's something that might take a while, and it's also something that the commission, it's got to be politically palatable for them to talk about increasing the fees of their citizens. So that's a pretty big discussion, but that's one of the ways that we might solve that. But I think if we, you know, for example, in that one, PRAC probably needs to be supportive of that to go forward. Otherwise, it's, you know, our citizens advisory committee, if you're not supportive, then
the park utility fee.
Yeah, of that particular item. So I was just kind of, you're saying, does that belong on a PRAC goal or not? I think PRAC needs to be supportive if that's going to go ahead if we get that.
Of the park utility fee. Yeah, and I also see, and I was just looking at the list of, you know, if we do half of these things, you know, we're going to put ourselves in even worse standing as far as that national average, and certainly the pain that you guys feel on a daily basis, and what you can and what you can't do on a daily basis, without having, you know, another goal of overseeing or being an advocate for increased staffing. You know, I think it makes sense to have it on the list. A goal, you know, of what? Of starting the discussion, of making the commission aware of, or making them aware of the importance of it. Certainly, they have a lot of input probably already and knowledge of what's happening, but we do have, you know, new commissioners. We have a new mayor. He's been around a while, but you know, as with the other things that I mentioned before, you know, the maintenance of the pool, I have a interest in a new slide in the pool and getting rid of the old one and getting a new one. You know, that's one of my little projects in the back of my mind, for a couple of good reasons. One, it needs it, and two, you know, it would allow for the swim team to get in there, and the Oregon City High School swim team, by the way, to use the pool for a 6-lane meet. But I think, you know, like I've said many times before, you know, now really is the time to think about how we would advise the commission to spend the taxpayers' hard-earned money in what makes the most sense. And if we can amass enough information to become a body that can give a very valid recommendation on certain things, I think we should do that if we have the opportunity. So I don't know, like I said, I'm not positive if the staff, you know, some sort of wording about hire new staff should be on the PrAC goals, or, you know, because it's more of a, you know, general fund item, you know, pool maintenance, you know, but it's still, I mean, the pool is park and rec stuff, so I think we could have it as a goal to put before the commission. Again, I keep referring back to a meeting that I was here, and the manager, the city manager mentioned that he wants ideas on the out years about how to organize, you know, how do we spend our money most effectively and manage the money that we have. And I think these types of things need to be put on that, you know, in the out years and be planned for. So we have some sort of plan that gels with the, you know, I'm going on and on here, but with the spring planning of the Glen Oak and Filbert Run properties as we start to master planning, et cetera, et cetera. So also making a recommendation and going before the commission on how we would advise them to spend their money, or the money of the people of Oregon City. Man, that was running on.
Do you did I see deferred maintenance as an item for the pool listed on your report?
We have deferred maintenance in every facility. That is one of our challenges in the pool. Deferred maintenance.
And is that a bullet item that you state on the report that I had read, that you submitted to us?
It's a statement that we try and keep in the forefront because the facility is so utilized by the public, and not just in the pool, but on the right-hand side of the community during uses. It's just something that it's a keynote for us that we're going to keep addressing those issues. They are a challenge for us. We do have things that we put as a priority as we go along to our maintenance, to our regular general fund budget line for buildings, and the rest of those as we go.
So the reason I'm asking is I thought I had seen that there. So there'd be some redundancy, I guess, in having it on here. But on the other hand, that report is not necessarily specific to a PrAC goal. If we would have put pool maintenance on here, that, you know, in my opinion, it's not an opinion. I mean, we've got identify funding for goal 1. I mean, yeah, we've got to find funds for determine future plans for RV park. I got a feeling that might involve some funds. Number 3, seek funding for these other parks. Number 5, begin the master planning process for Glen Oak. I got a feeling once that master plan is complete, we're going to need some funding to develop it. You know, I mean, to your point, I mean, and to your thought, I mean, I think it would be very appropriate to have on here as one of our goals, funding source to, and I would have no problem going ahead and stating the possibility of a park utility fee. To put it on here so it's in front of us. You know, I mean, the community would like to have these improvements, and why not ask the community for that rather than just sit here and identify, okay, yeah, we need all this funding and we need more personnel to maintain this because we're going to add our maintenance requirements when and if we're able to achieve some of these goals. It would make sense to me to have that, to make mention of that on these goals. That we need some kind of additional source of revenue that would go towards these goals. And you know, and Scott, I don't know if that utility fee, if there'd be specific allocations for that revenue that would prohibit it from going towards some of these things, or if it's pretty wide open initially.
Depends on how you write, how you frame it. There's what you have to do is develop what's called a methodology, which is sort of the parameters of the fee and how you determine what you're going to charge and what is going to go to. So it's open to that. Either be broad or you can be more specific.
Yeah. Okay. So I would make a motion that we add that to our 2011 Pratt goals. I'm not quite sure how we should state that, but I think it's an important thing to have on here is visibility, and I think it's a necessity. I'll second that motion.
Yeah.
I'm kind of begging for that motion. Very cool. Yeah, thanks.
Sort of like identify additional funding stream through park utility fee.
Or support the creation of a park utility fee?
Yeah.
That meant more.
Where is it currently? Just in discussion? Yeah. So support the current effort or discussion or whatever. Choose a word. Or an additional.
Utility fee or other source of revenue.
An alternative,
Yeah.
other options.
Yeah.
We have to be open to creative ideas for that.
Support. Open and support.
What about something along the lines of support the exploration of a parks maintenance utility fee or other alternative revenue sources?
Okay, good job.
That's kind of where the discussion is right now, frankly.
Yeah.
It seems like that should be partially our burden to look at, and I think you're right. You know, we can have these great creative discussions about where we should be looking, and if someone else has to ultimately kind of say, okay, here's how we can make it work and figure it out. It seems like that should be a part of our burden as well, to perhaps look for those creative ways of funding as an advisory group.
Well, also, I think it's part of our responsibility to have a voice that we feel like it's needed. That utility fee, or I like the word exploration of that.
Right.
Real quick.
Where this comes in, I mean, typically PrAC, you don't get that involved in maintenance discussion. That's kind of more, that's our job is to deal with the operations side of things. But where why I think this has reached that threshold is because what you are doing as PrAC is advocating for these, new additions of parks and new features in parks, new additions to parks like dog parks or the spray parks, or actually just building a brand new park like we're building this Geneva Park right now. Even though it's an existing park, it's got minimal features and it's pretty low maintenance. It's going to become a pretty high maintenance park. So anyway, on the one hand, what you're doing is as the voice of the community, you're advocating for meeting the citizens or the community's goals or the community's desires for parks and recreation amenities. So on the one hand, that's a lot of what your job is and what you've done well, or not all of you specifically, but over the last several years, PRAC has done a really good job of advocating for a number of projects or a number of park acquisitions that have been successfully accomplished. And the other piece, though, that's missing in that is we've created, because of the growth of the community or the growth of expectations and the changing, whether it's changing demographics or just the way that things kind of evolve with all of a sudden now dog parks. That's something that everybody thinks you should just have in your park system if you're a real park system. And just using that as an example, the other half of that equation is, but if we can't take care of these, why are we even building them? And so we are advancing the development to meet the needs of the community has outpaced our ability already to keep a proper level of maintenance. We kind of mask that because we've got some really good folks that do an excellent job. Larry Potter and his staff, they do the work for twice as many people. But at some point, you just kind of keep falling piece by piece further and further behind, and we're deferring maintenance projects that we can't afford to do. And, some of our older parks, our infrastructure is literally falling apart underneath, our feet, and meaning like sprinkler systems and pathways and bathrooms that we can't rehabilitate. And so at some point, we've kind of passed that point. We're trying to keep up to the best we can, but the level of service, what happens is the expectation for building these things, we can try to meet those, and partly because you have some different sources of revenue that you build the parks with that are not tied to the general fund, you can't use those development funds for operations. So you're able to build something, then there's not necessarily a source of revenue tied to taking care of it. What happens is, and where we're kind of at is, as the development has outpaced our maintenance level, every time we add something, we just fall backwards because we're not adding that incremental maintenance piece. The level of service that we are able to provide will continue to decline. So whatever that means, and we actually have to start making conscious choices of do we mow on a lesser amount of times per week or per 2 weeks or whatever. We don't clean the bathrooms as often. We can't empty the garbage as often. These are real things that people start seeing, and the more that we ratchet up with the development, the more that those things kind of fall behind because we're starting ourselves across that unless we grow that in. The general fund, as it is right now, can't really support the need that we have moving forward. That's why we're talking about some type of other source, and that's kind of where we're at. It's sort of like we either have to stop looking at all these great ideas that are in front of us, that the city came and talked about the dog park, the doing some other things, and looking at all these other projects into the future. We either have to sort of say, we're not going to do anything else until we fix the maintenance, or we want to keep advancing those discussions so you don't lose the momentum, but at the same time, we really got to catch up with that maintenance discussion. So, unlike most of our operational issues, I think this one really is practice supportive of this. It helps our moving it forward and helps us to, in the end goal is to have a parks and recreation system that meets the community's expectation, whatever that is. Right now, it is higher than our level of maintenance. That's our reality. Sorry about the long speech. I didn't be that super philosophical there, but I think it's worth that understanding. I think it's important to know that.
Well, I think we need to have another goal on here. That says that we need to identify funding for additional staff to bring up or to increase the staffing closer to what the national average or the national, was it the national average? National standard. I think that's a general enough way to say that, or you can come up with a better way, but it doesn't make sense to have a lot of these things on the list without the last two things we said. You know, the one is some increased level of funding source, and also, what are you going to do with that? I mean, you need to actually hire more staff to maintain the things that you're also planning on as a goal. So I think it would make sense. It makes rational sense to have that on the list as well. I mean, I think it's common knowledge too to the commission, the city manager, et cetera, that we are well below the national standard. Therefore, by having a goal on the list that says we want to find funding or identify funding for increased staff to bring us up closer to the national standard, I think would make sense.
I think that we risk alienating people who can support this by using the national standard. So I have that term. I think that they're going to say, what does that have to do with life today in Oregon City? I think that if we phrase it in more practical terms, like I think as part of what Scott was saying, I think saying that we support having adequate staff to maintain the goals that we've already achieved and that we wish to achieve. But I wouldn't, that language, I think.
Well, I guess you just have to.
Anxious these days. The question, we are not getting support. I don't think.
I have also another idea. In researching, looking at the dog park stuff, like I mentioned earlier, that there are many local communities, I won't say national, regional, it's in an insane amount of public support and volunteer support to make these things happen. People fall in love with this idea of a new thing that they need, and they wind up going and volunteering. I wonder and question, because talking to my neighbors here in the heart of the city, that there's a disconnect with our public parks, and that if there was more participation, if they were out and about, and as I think they're starting to get out and find our gems at parks that are out here in Oregon City, that they look around and they know it needs support, or it needs help, or it needs cleaning, it needs fixing, it needs repairs, and that maybe there's a way we can figure out in the language, in lines of what you're saying, Brian, to
like well below the standard.
To not only in like hiring of people, which I don't want to dilute that, that's important, but also perhaps community partnerships, so we can buffer that more to get the things that we need for those parks to keep them up. Maybe there's a work group at the high school wants to come out and get involved more in some ivy cleaning, or putting together, like the thing was presented to us. What do we call that? The
Singer Falls, River Falls.
Oh, the restroom in the what's that? Concession restroom. Things more partnerships with groups like that. Perhaps we can spend our energies in looking for alternatives to recruit people that can help add to our parks, and of course it's cost effective because it's wind up free volunteering, and it's getting the community out, being a part of our parks that we're trying to drum up that it's more support for.
No, I think it's a piece of it, yeah. And however we say it, I think it still needs to be a goal that we are wanting to advise the commission and make it known that it is a goal that we are aware of, and we support additional. And it's hard for me because of who I am to, let's employ more people to work for government, and that's, it's a swear word today, pretty much. And it is hard for me to say that out loud. I'll let everybody know that. But, being where I am and who I am, and knowing the situation as it is, I think it's something that we should support.
Did anyone take a note on the potential wording of the goal that we came up with earlier? Do you have that? Yeah, I'm afraid my time is getting really limited, and so maybe if we can move forward to hearing that again, maybe, and voting on it.
Oh, we don't have to vote on the goals, actually. We don't have to vote on those.
Oh, we don't?
And I think we're gonna talk about it next time too, because we are kind of, there's more that I would like to talk about, but I think we just need to move on.
Kind of a
But it is,
discussion.
yeah, it's nothing that we need to vote on. I mean, we need to kind of agree on, yeah, that sounds good, add it or don't add it. And if we agree on adding, at least adding the staffing part and the utility fee part, or the, you know, the more general statement on the alternate funding source, if we generally agree on that, I think we can move forward and we can end the discussion there.
I'll add that to the goals list and then bring it back next
Yeah.
time. And if it's something that you want to wordsmith further, you can certainly do that. I'll give it a shot to capture what
Good point, though. Yeah.
But that's put it pretty well, the way.
Yeah. I put that down in my notes here, so let's see if I can capture that and bring it back.
A little past 8:45.
Lynn did inform me that she had to leave early tonight because of some family commitment stuff, so you had an order to suggest if you had a report or something before you left that you wanted to give, maybe
It'd be great if you had
suggest
a
that to the
report, yeah.
chair.
I got a quick report from Kathy Wiseman, the director of the Pioneer Center, mainly about the fundraising successes that they've been having lately. Unfortunately, I wrote it on a piece of paper that's at the grandbaby's house. So I don't have it with me. Two pieces I do remember though. I think it was $3,400 check just came in from Beaver Creek
That's great.
Telephone.
Wow.
Cooperative.
I'm sorry?
I think it's 3,400. Yeah. I hope it'll be in a published, or perhaps Denise knows the exact amount. But it's just wonderful the level of support that comes out of that particular corporation, and yet the presence of Meals on Wheels being delivered to that area to keep people living independently, and they're all subscribers to that system. It's part of how community should work. And then the other thing is that she mentioned that they're making plans for a fundraiser called March for Meals. Yeah, that happens in the month of March, and I don't really know details about that, but we'll have a couple more meetings before that. But they do such a marvelous job of really working in the community and funding really cost-effective programs. It's exciting. So,
Thank you, Lynn.
yes, you're welcome, and I do apologize for the.
Well, I apologize for not ending at 8:45.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Can you make us count?
Okay, so let's table that discussion until next time. We'll put that on our agenda again, and I think we can wrap that discussion up in short order, I think, next time. So we'll move on to number 7C, pocket parks. And Scott, did you want to start us off on that with maybe just a brief discussion, or I mean, what the reason why it's on the agenda tonight is to, and this is another thing we could go before the commission with, and I intend to, and I certainly would like to include it, is the fact, and this obviously it's a big process, is what are we going to do about the pocket parks? And it gets back to this level of staffing and a lot of other things too. So I think I'd like that process to be outlined, and if we all are in agreement that these pocket parks, smaller parks, parks on corners of, like for instance the one that as you're going up Lynn Avenue, and there's this one turn you take, I'm not sure what the name of the street is, Sharman, up to Rivercrest, and right there at that little triangle, you've got Electric Lane and Sharman and Lynn. Right there, that triangle, you've got a park. It's a pocket park. It's maintained by the city, and that might not be the best example, but, you know, there are dozens of such parks,
I don't know.
or a couple dozen, or
Probably not that.
10 or 15.
I'd say more in the 10 category.
Okay.
10-ish. That's part of, I guess that's part of the question is the figure out the process to identify which ones it would be. You know, depending on, we'd have to define a little bit about that and then kind of determine which ones. Just for the new members here, the background is we have a number of, just like Brian said, just little patches of property that, in my opinion, and I think some of the members might support this, and we've talked about it before, is they really have no value open space wise. And we have a clause in our city charter that says that we can't just simply say, well, this little piece of property is no good and we don't want to keep taking care of it. Let's just sell it to somebody that might be interested in it or something. Can't do that without a vote of citizens of Oregon City. There's a clause in our charter that says if you sell or give away or dispose of park property, it can only be done with the vote of the citizens. So that idea was explored once before. It was probably 10 or 11 years ago at this point. It was before my time, so I don't remember the exact year. I've got some information in a file on that. And that's the other thing, Brian, to answer your question a little bit more, if we could go in and look at that initiative on the ballot and see which parks were on there before, see if that's a valid list or if we wanted to change anything or whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to identify the parks and the process, and then you know, another issue that whenever it makes sense to actually go before the commission and make it known that we would like to make this recommendation again. You know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, there are no original ideas. If somebody's already thought of it, and there's enough smart people probably on the commission that have this on their minds already. So let's help them, or remember them, give them a little yellow sticky on their table or desk, just as reminders. We think it's a good idea, and it makes sense based, you know, on you know, the situation that we find ourselves in, and it could be used as a source of revenue for our parks that we would like to, you know. Actually, what would be the use for the proceeds from the sale of those? What could be the use, or is it restricted?
It would be probably just kind of in general. It would go into our parks development fund, which is pretty wide open to our parks development project ideas. So, but it would be specified to that. In other words, it wouldn't go back in our general fund.
Right.
It would be gobbled up into some other program or something.
So it would be
the crack party fund.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it would be the double positive. So you would be eliminating a beautiful, you know, area, but you wouldn't have to not eliminating, but you wouldn't have to maintain it. You wouldn't have to pay for it in that way, and you would be realizing the money from the proceeds that would go back into the account. So sorry, Mike.
I just have a question. Maybe I misunderstood, Scott. Did that actually went to a vote before?
Yes, it did.
And
Turn down for all of the parts.
By-
All of them.
by a lot, by a little, by...
I'll have to, I don't want to give out bad information here just on some sketchy memory of having seen this a little bit, but I think it was a pretty high margin that it failed. However, I'll go back and review this a little bit further since we're advancing this discussion a little bit more, so you've got information. But I think it was combined with some other parks related issues. In other words, like part of the measure was should the citizens say yes that the Parks Department can get rid of these parks if they want to, and I think there was some kind of a levy or a bond measure attached to it. I'm not positive. These are sketchy things that I think I remember seeing in reading some of the material. But it was paired up with something else, or maybe it was a pool bond or something, but it was sort of like, you don't know really if they supported sale of the park or not, because they might have been saying no to the other issue, or maybe they were saying no to this, but things have changed, and I think if, you know, a lot of things, passing bonds or doing things that are important often take more than one time on the ballot. That's certainly been the city's experience. So if it's worth doing, it's certainly worth doing. It's certainly worth, you know, potentially exploring running it up that flagpole.
Right.
And again, it's important to keep in mind, you know, that there's going to be some process here, and the commission would have to support this and would have to initiate putting this on the ballot. So, you know, you have to,
Right.
there's some political consideration because the commission only has a palette for so many things that they can deal with that they think of as controversial or whatever. So it depends on, you know, how fast this process would move forward or not, or if it would be, you know, over the course of a year and then we develop a strategy to put on the ballot or whatever. Depends on what's going to be on the commission's plate at that time of community-wide issues. So would they, you know, something that they can support at that time, or is the timing bad and we have to defer it back a little further? I don't know. Anyway, just keep in mind that it's a process and there'll be some strong consideration.
Just another quick question. Are most of these of a size and in a location where they're going to have a resale value or a redevelopment value, whatever?
That's a really, really good question, Mike.
And that's part of the inventory that we...
Yes, that's part of the questions that we have to ask to develop this list, because the piece that Brian was talking about, which is actually called Sherman and Lynn Park, because it's on Sherman and Lynn. It's basically a little patch of ivy. Yeah, and nobody even knows that that's actually technically a city park, because it's just a patch of ivy. But I don't know. It's surrounded by city right-of-way streets, so who else would take that one as an example? But then there are a number that, you know, we can do this with the details of this at another time and, you know, look at a map or whatever. But there's a number of these. I think we drove around when we did our tour last summer. I pointed at some of them that are right adjacent to some neighbors, you know, some houses and some residential areas that I've actually been contacted over the time that I've been with the city on a few of these properties where neighbors have called me and said, would the city be interested in selling me that property? I know you don't use it much. And I'd buy it from you at market value to expand my property line and make a bigger backyard of it. There's probably a half a dozen of those types of things that do have that. And there's probably some that have pretty scarce, if any, value, and we may not be able to include, well, you can include those in the question with the ballot. Basically, you're asking permission to explore disposing of the property, but there may be nowhere for that property to go except for staying in as a public open space because it has no other potential. So you can still.
Right.
Have you looked at a kind of map of where they're at, plots of where they're at?
I've got an idea of which parks would probably be logical, but I guess here's my question. How do you want to go forward with this conversation? How do you want
I think maybe the logical starting point is identifying, you know, because there's already work that's been done. So what parts were submitted last time? And there was some level of detail that they dove into to make that list. And I think we should look there, and then, you know, again, I don't want to, you know, plan your whole week for you, Scott, or whoever's going to be doing this. But I think that, you know, identify the park, and then in addition to that, just your understanding and of you know, how you view those parks, and maybe an additional one or two, or maybe take one of those off the list. And then identifying the process by which we would have to go through, and then I think for any one of us to go to the commission, I think we need to be able to talk about the benefit to the community, to the city of that. So we have to be, how do we advocate for that? If I was sitting there, or, you know, Mike Mitchell was sitting there, how does he become an advocate for this to happen? As a CRAC member, as the vice chair, how does he advocate for this? Well, he has some information. He's identified the parks, and he knows the process, and he can elaborate on the benefit to the city. And he has knowledge that it failed in the past, but perhaps it failed for this and that, and now is a whole new environment, and it makes logical sense, rational sense to move forward again on it. And I'm in agreement with you, like on the last one. We don't have to have tons of detail. I think, but I think we should start getting it before them again, and let them know that we think it's a good idea. If again, I don't want to force this either. If you all think it's a good idea, but we'll know, I think, or have a better opinion of that once we get just a little bit more information.
I'd like to see the size. What's the total of each? What are the averages of the sizes of these plots? And if someone sat down and figured out whether or not it would look like they would be able to sell them. I mean, if we look at them and see these sizes and say, well, there's not really anything that could be done. It's hard to imagine someone buying something in the middle of a street intersection. So looking at a map and knowing the sizes, I think I'm going to have more insight or more perhaps ideas to be able to
bring back. Hopefully by your next meeting, I'm kind of have to look at besides what we're talking about at this meeting, I've already got a pretty big work list that my boss and his bosses expect me to do too. So, but I'll take a look at what we could probably do is bring back just a general kind of a recommended list of discussion, for a starting point of which properties we can talk about. Like you said, Brian, look at the last ballot measure that was done on this and which properties were on there, and then I'll just bring a park map and put it on your screen, and we can point to them, or I can bring the maps on the wall or whatever. We can just kind of go around and point to them, and I've got the acreage of all the parks. That's not a big deal. So.
And then if we could just outline and do like a straw man of the process, generally speaking, of what the process would entail. You could probably just, off the top of your head, do that, but I'm not asking you to do it now. And then the benefit, I think, is pretty is obvious. It depends on how much you would acquire from that sale, or it's lucrative. Yeah.
On it's actually called disposal or disposition of property.
Yeah, I was trying to find that word, but
that could mean a few things. You can sell it if it has value. If it has limited or no value, you can redesignate it. You can kind of either redesignate its purpose or actually give it away. There's ways of doing this called disposal. In other words, if nobody's going to pay for the thing, but somebody would somehow take it off your hands just to relieve you of the maintenance burden. There's considerations like that too. But again, there's a lot of stuff we have to talk about with each different property. So we have options.
Awesome. Okay, ready to move on to Delta there? Other general business?
Well, earlier I asked Scott about some information. My wife's been she's on an email group, Mothers of the McLaughlin District or something like that. And I don't quite know how many members, but she forwarded me an email of a genuine interest in the neighborhood about the Carnegie Center, the oak trees that engulf the park. I guess there's information about most of the trees there have some kind of infection of some kind, and so there was one that was cut down, I guess within a month, and there have been several within the last couple of years, and then I guess a lot of people are very concerned and wondering if all the trees are going to wind up coming down. Who's in charge of the oak trees there, and do you know the status of them? And then also within the same park too, a lot of concern about the water feature and what the status is on that. That was closed up by the Carnegie. That's right next to the now functional library. Do you have any information on that?
Actually, the latter first, because that's easy. I think we're going to give you a quick report on the Spray Park project tonight. Probably do that under the staff reports thing, and so I think that'll give you an answer to that question. The tree issue at Carnegie is a little bit more of a lengthy discussion. I don't know if you want to have that tonight, or if you want me to bring that back at maybe the next meeting or something, but we are working on a replanting plan. We went to the neighborhood meeting.
For the McLaughlin neighborhood.
Yeah, in early January.
Yes, that's where we got that
Yeah,
information.
and presented a conceptual idea of how we might approach the replanting of the park. And I think we've lost 5 of the significant trees there. It's Dutch elm disease is what has gone through the park, and eventually going to probably kill most of the trees. It damages them to the point where they become such a hazard that they're going to, a big section of it's going to fall off and hit somebody or something. So we get to the point where we have to take them out because of liability concerns. But, you know, it's a process over time. It's not going to happen. But we do have one more significant tree right now that's already on that list of we're looking at being pretty close to taking it out. But we've got some replanting efforts underway and some planning, and so I'll bring that back at your next meeting, give you a report on that.
It's such a gorgeous little park. It just almost symbolizes Oregon City, especially the age of those trees there. I mean, it's spectacular. To see those come down and to lose all those, and the shade there in the summertime with the concerts, and you know, a replant is a nice, you know, but nothing can ever recreate the grandeur of those trees that are there now. So you think whoever's in charge thinks they're all going to have to come down?
Well, that's a long-term thing. So don't think that as, you know, like in the next year they're all going to be coming down. That's probably like over 20 years or something.
Oh, okay.
But eventually it does. Once it gets into the root system, it affects all of the trees, and they're probably going to succumb to that at some point. So kind of one by one, they've been doing that for the last 6 or 8 or 10 years or whatever it's been, and they'll continue to do that for quite a while. So we're trying to be proactive in planting, you know, either in advance of them coming out or.
What are the ages on those trees?
They were planted originally in like 1913 or
13.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like they're 100 years.
Yeah, they are.
Thank you.
Okay. Those other things I'll talk to you about those other things offline there too that I emailed you. Maybe we can add 1 or 2 of those to the next now growing list of items we can talk about next time. Correct member reports. Starting with Mike.
I did it already.
Thank you. Thanks for that work. Thank you. Yeah, Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, my report is I'm living in a cave with an infant. I had a Christmas vacation, and I go back to my school, and all the teachers great trips to Hawaii and whatnot. And I get to report that I was in a cave with my baby, but it was great. I'm just training myself. I gotta sit on a couch and hang out for a long time.
You are demanding.
Yes, it's beautiful though.
I'm potty training one of my babies. Next. She's 2.5, actually. She's still my baby.
I had a question, Scott. I wonder if you might be able to answer this for me. With the end of the Oregon Trail, the interpretive center there, have you heard any discussion about how the potential for that river development with the Cabela's store, how that might be able to enhance that interpretive center? How they have to be able to work together to how that store might lend itself to the EOT site. beneficial for that.
Yeah.
Have you heard any discussion about that?
Yeah, there has been some discussion about that. I mean, I'm not involved in the development piece of
Right.
that. Potential development, very key word there. But it through the process of discussing that project or some other project, on the development site, there's been a lot of things that have always been talked about, how that ties into the interpretive center site, because it's obviously right there, whether something could incorporate that potentially, or at least be, kind of pairing up or partnering or whatever. So the answer is yes, but not very much more specifically than that. But it's always kind of there in the conversation. Yeah.
All the public stuff on it, and just as somebody who was involved in that process when you were down on the site, it just occurred to me that it seems like Cabela should lend itself pretty good to maybe some kind of a theme towards that in the Oregon Trail. If you heard anything about that, that's kind of off track of a member report, but I don't have any member reports.
That's a good report.
Thanks.
And Brian and Steve, track member reports can take really any form. I think Marty usually updates us on sports and something about his wife generally. And but for a long time, one of the interests I had was the pool, so I would update the track on just the different things that were at the pool and the blocks. There was a competitive starting block issue there with the state having closed a few of the competitive starting blocks for the swimming team, so I would update on that. Before it became an agenda item, Mike and Patrick talked about dog parks, or park visits. Yeah, we'd buy the promenade, and I saw this, and we've talked about that before in the track member reports, or things like that. So, did you guys have anything you wanted to report on? No. Okay. Anything you see or saw in the last couple of weeks since you've been appointed?
I don't know if there's one thing I can tell you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, in a lot of the parks here, or there's geocaches. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. I didn't know, because that's where I found a lot of these different parks, is geocaching, going, wow, I never knew that area was here until I did this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
cool. Okay, thank you. All right. Staff reports.
All right. I'll try to run through this real quick.
Yes, sir.
Just for our new members, what we'd like to do is just kind of give a general update on maybe some projects or some activities and things that are going on, just to make sure that as a member of the committee, you're aware of these things that are going on. So it's not all encompassing. We're trying to hit some highlights. The bathroom and concession building project at West Lowland Park that you looked at your last meeting, things are moving ahead. There's a little bit of a permitting process that has to go through with the planning department, some land use stuff, and just building permitting and that kind of thing. But the high school construction class, working with Larry Potter, they're keeping that thing pushing ahead, and they're on a very, very, very tight timeline to get that actually built this year, because it's built by the class. It's a student-built project. They have to finish it by the end of the high school year. So they're always under that time constraint, but we're still hopeful that that's going to get done this school year.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. One of the things that will really help is if we get good weather. The signage project off the promenade, right across the street from us here. I've been talking about that for the last 6 or 8 months, whatever. We're in the very, very last little piece of that, and the final signs are going to be going in. Either by the end of this week, which is tomorrow, or by the early part of next week. And encourage you to get out there and take a look. They're going to really be a nice improvement. One of the signs is in right now, the one at the top of the elevator. The others are going to be at the entry points, and I think that's going to be really nice. And then that's in conjunction with we've updated our put new benches in, and
they look great.
Yeah, new garbage receptacles. So anyway, making some nice improvements. I think the final piece of that we'll want to be looking at some point with some funds of some type is to to replace the lighting that's out there. It's the old kind of Cobra Head street lights on this historic grand walkway. We'd really like to put some period lights out there. I know that's something that the neighborhood's been talking about, and some other folks that are interested in that. So hopefully, and I think that would kind of, in addition to that huge project where the restoration was done last year, that would really put the icing on the cake, if you will. This is just informational because we've been talking about things regarding the city commission and kind of how that trickles down into what you do and that kind of thing. But the city commission has an annual goal setting retreat every year in January. That is taking place tomorrow and Saturday. It's kind of an all-day, 2-day thing. Yeah, their list of goals and actions. So that's important because that's really their. You've been talking about your goals. But the commission is the ultimate decision-making body for the city, and I think it's important once they've created a list of goals and action items for this coming calendar year. Probably need to kind of take a look at yours and see which ones compare with what and how that, whether your goals are in line or if they conflict, or because that's certainly a consideration as well. You got to be thinking kind of big picture there. Again, not to say that you can't initiate a project and bring it forward. Right. Or you're thinking of it. But anyway, that big important thing that the commission does every year is the next couple of days. So we'll be spending about 20 hours or something meetings over Friday night and all day Saturday.
I remember that last year.
And then finally, my last little thing, and then I'll let Denise give you a couple updates as well, is I think I've been sending you I think I sent some email updates, and I know we talked about it at the last meeting as well, the Ermitinger House, the structural issues that we've discovered that we're having there. The update, the latest and greatest on that is we're in the kind of final stages of engineers' evaluations of that structure. Essentially, the long story short is that the discoveries that we're making and what we're finding out is not good, and probably even more significant than we had anticipated. So we're going to have some pretty significant discussions about that with the city commission and with PRAC as far as, how does this, probably talking into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and, what are we going to do here? It's turned into a pretty significant problem. I mean, the options are going to be either fix it and pay a lot of money or just close it off. And even potentially closing it off, we've got to stabilize the structure so it doesn't just fall down. Historically, a very important building, and it's Parks and Recreation Department building. We tried to give it to the Park Service last year. For some reason, they just wouldn't take it. I don't know why. And so, anyway, that is going to be. We've been talking about all these issues with funds and maintenance and deferred maintenance. So that's probably right at the top of our deferred maintenance. It's going to be a major point of discussion. In fact, we've got that on our list of the agenda items with the city commission retreat, because that's one of their items on their agenda is to talk about facilities issues. That's right in the heart of that discussion. So stay tuned. There'll be more to report on that, but fortunately, it's not good news. So with that, needs to add anything that you want to add?
There goes the slide.
We have some Granny Spray parts to look at first, some concepts, or I did some concept drawings. We are looking to take that project out to proposals, and part of that process is setting a few neighborhoods. A design build is what we're looking at doing, which is what we have done at RiverCrest, where you send it out, you receive a bunch of different designs. Part of this process is to maintain or retain the historic qualities of the area and least impact what you visibly see. So we're looking at reusing what's existing there and fleshing out that spray park pad and giving more play value to the water features that we implement there. The neighborhood was very positive about the concepts that we presented. The concepts we presented may not be anything that we actually do, it's just giving them an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. We have been asked to move the project through a site plan review. That takes a little bit of time, as well as going through an HRD review. So we're looking at being on the HRD agenda in March. So we have a consultant that's going to help us push the paper process for the site plan review. So that's kind of where we're at now. Any questions?
Who reviews then the, usually you're opening up to the public for ideas?
It goes
And
through
then-
the planning department. I'm not sure.
Are they gonna make it public, their kind of decisions, or is it they'll just pick one and?
Well, I think what you're talking about, there's a couple pieces of that. What Denise was thinking, I think, was the site plan, the land use stuff, with the historic review board giving input and saying you can do these things, but we don't think you can do this.
Okay.
So there's going to be, that'll give us some guidelines and parameters that we can view this design within. What we're talking, I think what you're asking, Patrick, is the design selection process, and we're not sure yet. We haven't gotten to that point. We did talk at the neighborhood meeting about maybe having a neighborhood representative on the selection panel or whatever. Usually it's a staff committee, and then with the neighborhood interest, there was a person at the meeting that has young children that was particularly interested in maybe helping us select the design or whatever. So we're thinking about that. Does that answer what you were asking?
Oh yeah. I was just curious. So thank you for.
Sportcraft boat ramp replacement project. We are letting out the ad for bidding. That will go out for ads February 1st and 2nd. The bid opening date will be February 22nd. And then we can give you a more report on your February 24th meeting about that potential selection at that point. Daddy Daughter Dinner Dance, which is the highlight of recreation for us, is full, and we are taking a waiting list. It is on not this weekend, the following
Yes,
weekend.
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
You can give
Good
a
for
report
you,
on
sir.
that next.
Thank you for registering early. We are doing March for Meals, which is a national recognition of the Meals on Wheels and nutrition program that we offer at our Pioneer Center. I believe we are doing a Miles for Meals kickoff, which is, Lynn was gonna present some of the stuff, but I didn't have all the dates. I believe it's mid-February in conjunction with the Chambers. I'll send it out to everybody, and we'll also have it posted. So the advertisements are coming out, so just keep an eye out for those programs as they come out. There is one correction on our monthly staff reports that I send out, and Ted, thank you for catching that. On the RV park occupancy percentage, it was 10%, not 1%. So just a correction for that. See, we are doing some visible maintenance projects over at the pool. We are going to be doing a replacement of some flooring over there. We have some safety issues with our flooring, and so those will be taking off relatively soon. We're also replacing some of the kitchen countertops over there at the same time. So we haven't been to the pool. I'm going to take a peek. Before and after was always nice.
We're trying to rebuild that one piece at a time.
Literally.
Been doing that the last few years.
We take a little bit of our general fund facility maintenance budget line item, and we target some of our high priority areas. And usually it's safety things that come first. And then kind of piecemeal as we get closer to the end of the budget, what can we throw money at and what do we have left. Pioneer Center, you'll notice that there's some trees that will be planted here very soon along the walkway on 6th. So if you haven't been by there, we did do some new strips of maintenance. What we did is we had to take out some hazard trees these are replacement trees that we need to replace. So for one hazard tree removal, one tree goes back in. So these are our replacement trees. And if you are interested, at the pool, we're going to have an interesting fundraiser this weekend. It is the cardboard boat races. So it's a high school fundraising project. We've never done this. Should be very interesting. So it is this weekend. And
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, good report. And I don't think I've ever seen a cardboard boat race before. It doesn't go on and on, I would expect it not to last too long.
I think we'll be cleaning up a lot of cardboard.
On the bottom of the pool, exactly.
we accounted for that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and if there's nothing else, the next scheduled meeting is going to be the 24th of February. Okay. Anybody have any comments about that? I don't think, right off the top of my head, I've got any conflict with that. That sounds good to me. Okay. Are we ready to adjourn this meeting at 9:37?